Hi, Bill from Poliigon here. In this video, you'll learn how to use the Terrazzo Generator. I'll give a brief overview of the different settings and show you how to export the final material to your 3D software. All the settings I'm going to show you will be the same regardless of where you're using it. You can open it in a Substance plugin if you're using 3ds Max, Maya, or any other application that supports the latest Substance plugin. We recommend, however, using the generator directly in Substance Player, which is where I'm going to be demonstrating it. It's also worth noting that Substance Player is a free download. I'll be sure to include a link to it and any relevant add-ons in the description below. Okay, so the first category of settings we have here are some general settings, most importantly the resolution of the final material. Now, by default this is set to 512, and this is so the viewport updates nice and fast while you're making alterations. We'll increase this number to 4K when it's time to export, but for now I'm going to set it to 1024 as that still runs pretty nicely on my particular hardware setup. Next we have a random seed value here, which will basically create a completely different version of the current material based on the settings below. After that we have a number of settings relating to exporting. It's best to leave these on their default settings until after we've finished customizing our material. Finally, we have a couple of global modifiers for the generator. We can choose between a continuous slab and two different types of tile style. We can also set the scale of our material from here. Okay, moving on to the Terrazzo parameters, this is where we can start to change the look of our material. Firstly, we have the type with 3 different options, and this will affect the overall style. Everything else from this point is about customizing that chosen style. We can change the type of binder, as well as customize its color. The binder is basically the part of the material that isn't flakes of marble and glass, the base material. We have controls for color uniformity and air bubbles within that binder too, though it's really hard to see unless you're up at like 4K resolution and zoomed in quite close. So yeah, kind of difficult to demonstrate over the video, but does add a nice bit of high-end detail to the finished result. Lastly, in this section we have a couple of controls for the chips that the binder is holding in place. We have a few marble styles, and we can select whether we want to use infilled chips or not. Next we have a primary chip category, which is kind of oddly named, but basically this whole section controls the look of the chips within the binder material. We can adjust the spacing, how uniform that spacing is, a general scale and spacing randomization parameter. We can adjust this chip removal slider to reduce the total amount of chips without affecting the distribution from the previous settings, and we can decide on how many different chip types are used. Now this last one's important as it will create a new subcategory below for each chip type. So for fine control it might be an idea to start at 1 and then work your way up from there. For each of those chip types we have controls for the type, either marble or glass. We have some handy presets for different styles, but also an advanced panel where you can really get into the fine detail if you need to replicate a really specific type of chip pattern. Now, this video is just a brief overview. There's a lot of controls within these menus that I've glossed over in the interest of keeping this video short, but pretty much any look and style of Terrazzo can be achieved either by using the advanced binder settings or making adjustments to the color, gloss, surface and finish adjustments at the end of this category. Now, if you select one of the tile patterns instead of a continuous slab, you will also have the layout and tile parameters section, as well as a small section on grout. They are fairly simple to use. Firstly, we have the layout category, which will dictate what options are presented to us. For example, if we leave it on 3 tile sizes, which is the default, we will have this layout drop down with a number of different patterns to choose from. However, if we change the layout to, say, 2 sizes, we have different options available within those drop downs. For most of them though, we will have the same adjustments beneath, like tile size, angle and depth variation, and other fine controls to help us get the look we're after. Lastly, we have the grout category where we can adjust the width, depth and curve profile of the grout as well as its colour. Remember, if you're not seeing these options, it's because you have the style set to a continuous slab in the general settings at the top. These settings only appear if a tiled style is selected. Regardless of the style though, the next section we have here is surface imperfections. We have some controls for the distortions to the sort of glossy covering of the material. We can add in some scratches to make the look of the material a little less perfect. Though be aware you really won't see these until moving up to 4K. Finally, we have a section called Gloss Imperfections. Here we can add in spills, splashes, cup rings. We can disable the default sort of cloudy imperfection and add in mop residue if we're doing like a floor or whatnot, or even possibly a wall material. All these effects are somewhat subtle, but should help add that little extra bit of realism to the end result. Though, as I've mentioned on a few points here, you do really need to step up to 4K prior to exporting to see their effect properly. Speaking of exporting, let's head back up to the top of the menu and take a look at the values that we skipped over earlier. We have this option for workflow. This will basically change between the default metallic roughness PBR workflow and a specular glossy one. Depending on your application and preference, you may want to adjust this. I'm going to set it back to metallic roughness as I'll be exporting to cycles. The next two values allow us to choose a normal map format. This is hugely important as different engines are expecting different normal map types. We have a selection of rendering engines listed to choose it for you, but if yours isn't listed, then just make sure that you find out if you need DirectX or OpenGL normal maps. I'll select cycles for this, and now that we're ready to export, I'm going to set the resolution to 4K and then head up and click on the Export as Bitmap button in the Export menu. This will bring up an export window where we can choose from all the different available textures. We include just about every possible option, so I'm going to unselect them all and just select the ones I want for cycles, which in this case is base color, normal, roughness, and height. All that's left now is to set the format. I tend to use .tiff files, but PNG would work just as well. Once I'm happy with my settings, I just need to hit export and that's done. All that's left now is to load those textures into my target application and apply the material in my scene.